Hi and welcome from Venice Beach, California. Today I will debunk one of the common misconceptions about billionaires. Do you really need to be born in a wealthy, developed country in order to become extremely rich, in order to become a billionaire? If you think in order to become a billionaire you need to be born in a rich, developed country, I will tell you a story of Narayana Murthy. Narayana Murthy was born in one of the poorest countries in the world, in India. Those of you who have been in India, they know that this country is dominated by poverty, unbelievable poverty. In Narayana's childhood, in the house, they didn't even have furniture. Everybody was sitting and sleeping on the floor. His father advised him to choose his hobbies carefully, and it should be hobbies which don't drain on his meager budget, like reading or talking to friends. When he wanted to read a newspaper, he didn't buy one because it was just too expensive. He went to a public library in order to read a newspaper. But India, in the early 80s, it wasn't just one of the poorest countries in the world. It was also one of the most hostile countries to the free enterprise. They had a socialist government which developed an array of nonsense regulations, which made it really difficult to do business in that country. It led to extreme corruption, and the government officials were almost almighty, deciding about success and failure of many of the entrepreneurs. In 1981, when Narayana Murthy, together with 6 co-founders, founded a software company, Infosys, the problems they encountered seemed to be unsurmountable, and the regular power shortages seemed to be one of the lesser problems. But could you imagine running a software company without a computer? Well, Infosys didn't have one. Why? Because in order to import a computer to India, a license from the government was needed. And Narayana Murthy told me he needed 3 years and 50 visits to Delhi to get that license. They had the company in Bangalore, and Delhi was like 1,500 miles away. They couldn't afford a plane, so he needed to take a train, and it was 2 days in every direction to get there and to get back. 50 visits in 3 years. So this is the kind of bureaucracy they faced. Now you could ask yourself, how was it possible for them to run a software company without a computer, to program? How did they program? Well, they found a customer in the States, and 6 of the co-founders went to the USA in order to program on the customer's computer, while Narayana stayed in India in order to clear up the formalities to import their own computer. Communication was another problem. Narayana told me an average Indian company needed at that time 5 to 7 years in order to get a phone line. The first in line to get phone line were the Indian government officials. Why? Well, they had the highest priority. And now you would ask yourself, so how did they communicate without a phone? I mean, they didn't have a computer, they didn't have a phone. So how did he communicate with his co-founders, with his clients in the States without a phone? Well, he needed to regularly go to post office and use a public phone in order to call them. Some of you may ask themselves, well, what if they wanted to call him? I asked him the same question. He just smiled and said, well, they couldn't. They just couldn't. After a year of effort, they finally got a phone line. But having a phone line didn't mean they had also a connection, especially not with the States. From what Narayana told me, most of the time there was no signal on the line. And when there was a signal, it usually was the occupied signal. 3 years later, they got a license to import a computer, but having the license didn't mean they could afford the computer. What they needed was a mini computer. That's the type of software they were doing. And mini computers costed hundreds of thousands of dollars in those times, and they just couldn't afford that money. Infosys was founded with something like $1,200 saved up by 7 founders. So hundreds of thousands of dollars was just an amazing amount of money. And also this problem was solved by Narayana Murthy, who performed another miracle I will write about in my book, The $1 Billion Secret I'm working on right now. After the computer was imported and installed, the 6 co-founders could come back to India and work on their own computer. And here they encountered another issue, another problem, another challenge. How to get the code they produced to the customer. At that time, it was a pre-internet times. You couldn't send an email with your program, with your code to the customer. The way to do it in those times was to save your program on a magnetic tape and then to send it to the customer via traditional mail. And on the other side, the customer just loaded it from the magnetic tape to his computer. But the solution didn't work between India and the States. Why? Because any package from India to the States needed to go to the customs, to the Indian customs. And the Indian customs officers needed 2 weeks to perform the customs process. What was the result? The result was, together with the shipment time, a program needed 3 weeks to get from Infosys in India to the customers in the States. But can you imagine, for those who program, you did some coding and you want to present it to a customer to get his feedback. He will tell you, okay, I like that, I don't like that, you forgot about that, and this doesn't work correctly. And every time you want to show that piece of code, that program to the customer, it needs 3 weeks till you can get feedback. What's the consequence of that? The consequence is the timeline of the project, it extends in eternity. It's just unacceptable condition in business. It's an entrepreneurial harakiri. You need to shorten that time in order to speed up your production cycles. So what was the solution? How did they solve the problem? Well, what they did was they printed out the code on paper, they faxed it to the States, and on the other side, another Infosys employee typed it manually from the fax into the computer of the customer. Of course, it took manual work and it wasn't error-free, but this dramatically speeded up the shipment of the software. So, and now you can imagine in what conditions they need to work and what obstacles they needed to overcome in this third world country, in one of the poorest countries in the world. And I got also a taste of that when performing the interview with Narayana Murthy. At that time we had 45 degrees Celsius in Delhi, which means around 111 Fahrenheit. This is a temperature that doesn't invite to any physical or intellectual effort. Nevertheless, they need to perform their work. Infosys is considered one of the most developed, the wealthiest companies in India, with probably the best working conditions for the employees. in Infosys guest house when we had the interview. There was also a meeting room when we conducted the interview. It was air-conditioned, of course, but during the interview there was a power shortage, and the aircon went out. And we tried with Narayana to switch it on again, but it didn't work. So he called the maintenance team in order to make it work again. They needed 10 minutes and 2 visits to the meeting room in order to make it finally work. And as soon as they made it work, 5 minutes later we had another power shortage and it went off. So we left it as it was because we didn't want to lose time. But the temperature went up dramatically quickly. And this gave me a taste how it may look like to work in that environment 30 years earlier. Can you imagine that? I mean, India developed a lot in that time, and also Infosys, but they started in really, really simple conditions. Today, Narayana Murthy is a billionaire. Infosys employs 200,000 programmers. It is more than Apple, than Microsoft or Google. This is the largest software company in the world. 2003, Narayana Murthy was named the World Entrepreneur of the Year, which means he was the best entrepreneur in the world, if you will. So if you now think you need to be born in a developed, wealthy country in order to become extremely rich, you're just wrong. This is not the reality. This is a myth. Narayana not only became a billionaire, he made also 6 of his co-founders billionaires, and at least 2,000 of his employees became millionaires. How did he do it? Well, his personality principles I will describe in my upcoming book, The $1 Billion Secret, I'm working on right now, together with 25 other self-made billionaires from all around the world. Okay, that's it from Venice Beach, California. If you liked it and you would like to find out more about billionaires, their lives and their thinking, subscribe here. Or watch one of my favorite videos here. Thanks and see you from California.